people are expecting. People are expecting quite a bit.
This is your time.
You want to win. You're going to be like this.
There are no shortcuts in life.
You'll get better because you make each other better.
The inches we need are everywhere around us.
I know plenty of people that are capable. I know fewer people that are willing.
You have to believe it to do it.
Now, what are you going to do?
Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of Sideline Sessions here on the B Podcast Network. Thanks for being with us. Today, we're going to talk about a topic we actually haven't really discussed too much yet on the series, strength and conditioning and sports performance from that perspective, and how athletes really prepare their bodies in a variety of ways to excel in their sports. My guest today is Connor Gettemy, also known as Coach G. He is the director of sports performance at Flagler College and the owner of Gett Strong Performance, which are both located in St. Augustine, Florida. At Flagler, whose sports teams compete in NCAA Division-II, Connor oversees a sports performance department that services over 400 athletes. During his 5+ years there as director, the Flagler teams have won 23 conference championships, been to 10 Sweet 16s, 6 Elite Eights, 4 Final Fours. And under his direction, Flagler has produced 169 all-conference selections, 22 All-Americans, and a number of pro athletes in a variety of different sports. His company, Gett Strong Performance, specializes in youth and high school sports performance with a mission to strengthen the individual, both in body and character, so that young boys and girls can become the best possible versions of themselves. Connor, pleasure to have you here.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
What are the myths about strength training? I think there's a lot of them that still persist, particularly when we're talking about, high school athletes, potentially a little younger, when they're preparing to really get into what real training looks like for those sports, and maybe for the first times. I think there's a lot of misconceptions, misunderstandings, fears, right, that exist that maybe prevent young athletes from getting into the appropriate types of programs.
Mm-hmm. Probably the biggest one, just like the most general, would be lifting weights stunts your growth, which is like a 60-some-year-old myth that still like refuses to go away. Like literally last week, I had a parent tell me that their pediatrician told them that their 12-year-old shouldn't participate in any strength training whatsoever. So like, for a medical professional to still be holding that opinion, or at least be using that blanket language like never or don't do it at all, is just asinine. Like it's ridiculous. So like the term resistance training, all it means is that you're exercising a muscle against an external force. Gravity is an external force. So if you're using an appropriate load with somebody, you can resistance train them. Now an appropriate load might be 0. Like if the only external force you're training against is gravity, like your own body weight. So, even if you take somebody that is well trained, if you have them hold, say, like a split squat a half an inch above the floor for long enough, might take a while, but eventually it's going to fatigue them, and it's going to get to a point where they are actually going to get some benefit, some physiological benefit out of it. So scale that all the way back to, okay, this is a 12-year-old or even younger. Like I worked at the Lemieux Center for a little while up in Pittsburgh, and we worked with U9 hockey kids, and we gave them a resistance training program. Now, their resistance training program was like wall sits, like body weight push-up holds. Like we didn't even do push-ups. We just got to the bottom of a push-up position and just told them to hold themselves there as long as they can. Like there's no reason why you can't find a way to exercise a muscle against something that's going to resist it. You can always find a way to do that, even if somebody is the most basic of basic and completely inexperienced.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to have, proper instruction and supervision and a program that is developmentally appropriate and that is not beyond an individual's ability, right? Somebody shouldn't lay down on the bench for the first time ever and put 300 on it. They should work their way up to it. But yeah, I mean, that kind of myth and fear, I remember that the first time I was really getting into a weight training program was preparing to play high school football and kind of being a little skeptical getting into it because I had heard these things. And I mean, I had also heard when I was whatever age, 8 or 9, when I like to drink the coffee after church, and I was told that would stunt my growth. And I'm 6'5", so I mean, it's a shame. I could have been like 7 feet. I could have been the NBA, but it turns out, but yeah, I mean, that's an important thing, right?
Sure, and just because you had said it, like, I think that actually does play a large part, like perception of whether it's I mentioned this the other day to somebody. I'm working with a couple of my college athletes that are coming back from pretty significant knee injuries, and I never, when they're training, I never say don't do this on your bad knee. I say don't do this on your unaffected knee, because I'm not like pretending like they're not hurt. Like, your knee has been structurally affected unquestionably. But like, I don't want to develop this thought process of this is my bad knee. And so then you're getting all these subconscious, like, just negative feelings about it in general, but compensation patterns or whatever. You just, like, the more you treat it like this is a thing that can go wrong, like, to a degree, you're not guaranteeing anything, but to it, like, that's not the best way to go about things. So similarly, like, if you're told from age 9, if you lift weights before your 16th birthday, your knees will explode. Well, the first time that you, like, get under a bar, or even if it's empty, or even if you just do like a 20-pound goblet squat, or like somebody says, oh, squatting's bad for your back. Well, the first time you squat, your back might get sore, just because you have spinal erectors that work when you squat. That's not to say like your back should be doing all the work or should be crazy in pain after exercise. But if all you're told is that this activity is bad for you, then when you participate in that activity, your body's probably not going to respond very well. And that's just going to reaffirm and keep feeding the negative opinion you already had about the activity. So it's just a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Is there, a general age at which young athletes should begin to have some form of strength training, whether it's specifically weight training or some other type of resistance training?
I think a good way to go about it would just be attention span. So because that varies. So instead of saying, well, by age 11 or by age 13 or by whatever, the vast majority of those 9-year-olds were like, it was daycare pretty much. Now, like, we could still, I remember, so they gave us like 2 separate U9 teams to train at the same time in the same room. So it was like 30 kids under the age of 10, like 9 or 10 years old. So I'm like, what the hell are we going to do that could even make this look organized? And so what we did was we set up rows of cones, like 4x4, and then each team, like, so 16 kids on one side, 16 kids on the other, and each kid stood in front of one cone. And then we just called out exercises, and we said, okay, for the next 15 seconds, we're going to do squats. And what we did, and like the rules of the game, what we told them was going to happen was, if your form gets bad enough, or if we see a number of reps in a row that don't look like what we showed you, then we're going to take your cone away. And now once we take the cone away, you still have to keep going, but now you're no longer able to hold on to that cone. And so once we got through like split squats and push-ups and bodyweight squats and like maybe 1 or 2 other ones, then whichever team had the most cones at the end remaining won. And so if you just stood a 9-year-old in the middle of the room and said, we're going to do 3 sets of 10 squats and we're going to do 3 sets of 10 this, like, you're going to lose them on rep number 4, versus like you've got 13 other kids on your own team saying, hey, don't screw, or 6 or 15 other kids saying, hey man, don't screw it up. And like, so you've got that pressure, like fun competitive pressure. And then you're looking at 16 other kids on the other team that you're trying to outperform. So all of that resulted in, like, I'm kind of proud of how it went. Like, they enjoyed them. Like, they had fun. They were locked in and they enjoyed themselves. But all the coaches were like, holy crap, like that looked like good training. So I tell that story to make the point that those were all 9 or 10-year-olds. So who's to say that we didn't use any weight whatsoever? So how much stronger did they really get? Probably not very. But when you first start in a weight room, The gains that you make are neurological. So all they really did was get better at using what they already had. Like their central nervous system and their brains were able to communicate with their muscles more efficiently. So they're still going to be able to produce more force or at least move more efficiently, which is going to result in a greater output of force. So to me, that's still strength training, so to speak. So to answer your question, it's, can you get this kid to pay attention long enough that you can get something discernible out of the session? If the answer is yes, then go ahead.
Right. Yeah. And tension, certainly a challenge and an opportunity there. So you've been, involved with 20 plus sports, men, women, boys, girls, different ages. Where do, I guess, in like training methods, in what types of training, strength conditioning wise, athletes should be focused on? Like, I guess, where do the biggest differences break down? Is it more by sport, by age, by gender, a little bit of everything, as far as kind of what's typically going to be most beneficial to athletes?
I would say the younger an athlete gets, the higher the likelihood is that they should just focus on technique. And when I don't mean that, okay, you're not allowed to touch a barbell until you turn 16. Like, again, going back to the youngest populations that I've worked with in my career was when I was with UPMC up in Pittsburgh. So, I had 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds that, because they had been with us for so long, like I was only there for about a year and a half or 2 years, but I vividly remember, his name was John. I can't remember his last name, but he's probably like in college now. But he was this tiny little kid, but he moved really, really well. And like there was no good reason to not give him some graded exposure to weights. And so he was weight training, but it was holding a 15-pound dumbbell. And then it was, okay, well, can you do that for this many reps? Was that easy? Okay, let's do 17 and a half next time, or let's do 20 next time. So I bring that up to say that just because he was so young, I didn't set any sort of arbitrary standard of, well, he moves well, he's doing everything else right, but because he's not X years old, he has to keep doing this. So we didn't stick a bar on his back. I'm pretty sure we didn't. Right? Like, but that he easily could have worked had I stayed there. That was the next goal. Was, hey, you moved up with these dumbbells pretty well. You added 5 pounds and then added 5 more and added 5 more, and now you're actually holding a weight that is as heavy as a bar would be anyway. So let's do that. And that was going to kind of be our next thing. So the younger an athlete gets, the more they should focus on technique and form, because again, they're just going to get more efficient at using what they already have, as opposed to like experiencing actual physiological changes in like their connective tissue and their contractile tissue. The differences between, I mean, the thing that's going to determine, if you give me, this boy, he's this age, he plays this sport. There's a girl, she's a different age, she plays a different sport. The stuff that's going to be similar is, there's basic physiological principles of training that don't really change based on gender or sport or goal. It's like, if you lift X amount of percent of a 1-rep max, the physiological characteristics that the adaptations that you're going to elicit are going to trend in this direction. So those stay the same. And so you're going to see those similarities in pretty much any program I write. But whenever you perform it like your needs analysis of, okay, what energy systems are primarily used in the sport? What joint angles and types of muscle contraction are most often used in this sport? What sites of injury are most common in the sport? Well, that's going to change from sport to sport. So that's going to help to dictate the differences. Is the sport more so than the age or the gender? There's certainly probably the most popular one, like the first one that anybody learns in exercise phys, is that female athletes are more prone to knee injuries than male athletes. So you could say, like, what's a gender difference? Well, maybe there's a chance we do more single leg work, or just more quote unquote ACL prevention in females compared to males. But by and large, the thing that's going to dictate the differences in a program is the sport they're playing.
Are there sports, like particular sports that you've noticed have, I guess, the biggest gap in training between the high school and college levels, meaning like the athletes that are coming into the college level have typically been like not really doing the type of training at high school that they should be? Are there's, kind of sports where that stands out?
Yeah, I could say so. I'll kind of go the opposite for a second. A couple observations that I've made. So I oversee all of our sports, but in terms of the sports that I work with directly on a one-on-one basis, women's lacrosse, volleyball, women's tennis, women's soccer, and men's basketball. And I'll say the number of volleyball players and women's volleyball players and women's lacrosse players that come to the weight room and on their first day already move well and have a base level of strength is getting higher. Football is the best example of bigger, faster, stronger, so ingrained into that sport culture that kids make the decision for themselves. They're not even told they have to lift weights. They just kind of know. As soon as you know anything about football, you're like, well, I got to get in the gym. Versus a lot of other sports lend themselves to, well, if I'm just good enough at my sport, that's kind of all I need to do. As opposed to, if I'm not in the gym, there's no way I'm going to be good enough at my sport. So I don't know if, because women's lacrosse is, I wouldn't quite call it a collision sport, but it is a pretty damn contact sport. I kind of wonder if some of that same mindset is prevalent of like, well, I'm going to be, rubbing shoulders and hitting into people and this, that, and the other thing. So like, I better be durable. I better be big, strong, and fast. So they just kind of gravitate towards the weight room. Volleyball is a very explosive sport. So again, even sort of a layman understanding of the weight room is, well, I think lifting weights can probably help get me stronger and more powerful. So again, if an adolescent female volleyball player has any sort of real goals to play in college, something that might occur to her sort of on her own, especially if she's watching Division-I volleyball and elite Division-I volleyball, those are some big freaking girls. And they're studs. They're jacked, they're tall, they're big. So they might just see them and say, well, I got to make sure I'm doing what they're doing. As opposed to say, I'll just take the easy one, like soccer is still, we've got we have a really eclectic mix. There's some girls on our team that just freaking love the weight room. They'll get after it. And then there's some that, they just live and breathe soccer and they're like, okay, I'll lift because I know it'll keep me healthy, but like, I just want to get back out to the pitch. I do think that there's a considerable amount of gains, whether it's strength, speed, power, what have you, that's getting left on the table. I think there's a lot of female soccer players under the age of 18 that otherwise might not get an opportunity. But if they were bigger or faster or stronger, then they're suddenly going to be exponentially more likely to at least get a look. This is just my own opinion, and I don't know how prevalent it is, but I think a lot of coaches, if they're given a choice between the two, it's this kid has a great understanding of the game, but they are the worst athlete I've ever seen, versus this kid barely knows soccer, but he or she is the freakiest athlete ever. I think coaches might take the athlete and say, well, I can work on the soccer part, rather than if you're slow, you're slow. So for the people that are in that second camp, if you're just the slow ones or the weak ones or the small ones, getting into the weight room is at least going to give you a fighting chance.
Yeah, I don't want to overgeneralize, and I don't, it's different everywhere, but on my own high school experience, I played football, basketball, and baseball. And football was the only sport that had any kind of a weight training program. Among other sports in the school, I think the wrestling team did, but that's about it. And it's a disservice, particularly to the future of those athletes. You think about a sport like baseball, strength training is very important to your ability to succeed long term. You may be successful at your level, but once you move on to college, it's going to take a long time to catch up. If you're kind of behind on that, it's something that I think a lot of those individual sport coaches, particularly if you're in a school or a district that doesn't have a strength and conditioning staff who's working with all the sports, the individual sport coaches don't emphasize or focus on that as an important factor, or see it as time away from what they want to be spending time on, right? And it, it could have more benefit than they're realizing. But are there questions? So, we talked about some of the myths and misgivings that athletes may have been exposed to. Are there specific questions athletes should ask when they're beginning a training program about how to either develop the proper training for what they want to do, or the things that they need to know before they really get into it, when they're getting to that level?
Just to make sure I'm answering the right question, is it like, if they're looking for somebody, how should they vet whether that's a good person to train with or not, or like just fundamental principles that they should know about their own bodies? Or
yeah, I mean, let's say, if it's an athlete's first time where they're going to be doing some type of strength and conditioning performance training, something other than practicing their sport specifically, what are the things that they should know, that they should communicate to make sure that the program is right for them, right? If we have young athletes who hopefully are playing multiple sports, right, and they don't want to have a program that's only optimized for one sport, or if they do have some of these things that they're unsure about, or or they've been told one thing, like, are there certain questions they should be asking, or things they should be discussing with their their coach, their strength and conditioning coach, or otherwise, to kind of understand what's going to be a good type of training program for them?
I think something that they should all just commit to memory, or just like, the quicker that they can understand and accept this, the better. Just how long it takes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the first couple of months they're actually going to get, like, this is all relatively speaking, but they're actually going to get a lot stronger pretty quick, because again, those neurological gains happen a lot quicker than physiological gains. So I've been training, just as an example, like, I've been training pretty consistently for almost 20 years. So the only type of quote unquote gains that I'm going to make are physiological ones. Like, my muscles have to get bigger, or my tendons have to increase their stiffness, or like, actual physical changes in my body have to occur. My brain has maxed out its capacity of knowledge of use of my body. So as opposed to a 14-year-old, like, there's a popular strength training program online. I wouldn't recommend this for high school athletes, but there's a popular strength training program online called Starting Strength. And it's literally, I'm going to get it all wrong, but it's just super duper simple. It's just like bench, squat, and deadlift, add 5, and the progression of weight is add 5 pounds every time you're in the gym. If that's the very first thing you've ever done in the gym, that actually will work for like months and months and months, if not up to a year, providing that you're eating enough and everything else about your life is somewhat on point. And it's going to be strictly physiological, or strictly neurological. And then as you continue, the returns will start to diminish, but you're going to make a crap load of progress in your first year compared to every subsequent year that you're training. Unfortunately, the way it works is you're going to make less and less progress. You'll still make progress, but you'll make less and less. Looking at the complete other end of the spectrum, an Olympic weightlifter will train for an entire quadrennial, like an entire 4-year cycle, and they'll add a couple of kilograms on their total. So my point is, they're initially going to experience a lot of strength gains, and they're going to be able to increase weight fairly quickly, but then those will taper off. And what I think they need to understand is, this is a marathon, not a sprint. So if somebody starts at age 12, let's say, and they consistently strength train 2, 3, 4 days a week, however much, as long as it's consistent, until they're 18, until they get to college, that's 6 straight years of strength training. Like, even if you're not going up 5 pounds every time, even if you get to the point once you're 18 where you're only going up 5 pounds a month or less or whatever, the amount of sessions that you will have stacked on top of each other that are benefiting you psychologically and physically, you're going to be light years ahead of the kid that doesn't like the gym and just like, no, I'm just going to keep playing my sport, or I'm just going to keep doing my thing and keep going to practice and keep getting shots up, and that'll be enough.
Yeah. What other development in youth and amateur sports is important? Character, I mentioned in the intro, that's part of the approach you take with your company. Like, what does the holistic development of a young athlete look like?
So this is a kind of a personal philosophy of mine. Like, I think, and I'll explain why this is flawed right off the bat, but I think that amateur athletics, so college and high school, is the most important function that it serves, and the main focus should be improving character, because sports, and this is going to sound weird as a strength coach. Like, I've been a strength coach for over a decade. I've been a sports fan for as long as I've been alive. Sports don't matter. They really don't. Like, if you can build it up as long as you want to. Like, Ray, do you watch hockey?
Mm-hmm. A little bit.
So you know who Raymond Bourque is, right?
Uh-huh.
If he wins a Stanley Cup after 21 years, if he lost that Stanley Cup, nothing is different the next day.
Right.
He's still, like, all the money still got made. Nobody died. Nothing bad happened except he didn't win the trophy. So,
right.
And that sounds really crass, but like the point that I'm making is it gives kids and it gives young adults an arena to have something devastating like that, because that would be the worst moment of his entire life, failing that. So similarly, like, if you lose the state championship game on a missed free throw or whatever, like, the most devastating thing up to that point happens to you. The next day, you wake up and you go back to school. Nothing bad happens. You didn't lose your job. The lights didn't get shut off. You didn't go hungry. Nobody starved. So it's a really, really great place to help build character, to experience really, really high highs and really, really low lows, and learning how to handle that.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I understand why that's flawed, because amateur athletics is intertwined with how you make professional athletes. So I get that. I'm too old school with that. I'm speaking from a losing side. So to answer the question, I think any positive aspect of one's character you can work on in a weight room, on a court, or on a field. Consistency, discipline, self-respect, teamwork. I mean, you can name 100 other ones. If you can learn how to maximize those things in something that quote unquote doesn't matter, like a sport, then once you're in a classroom, a boardroom, or a weight room, or anywhere else, just kind of by default, you're going to excel, because hard work is universal. Discipline is universal. Consistency is universal. So what I don't like is amateur athletics getting inundated with individualism, for lack of a better term. That's not to say that you shouldn't have fun playing sports. Sports are fun. Winning's fun.
Yeah.
But if I have to see one more 16-year-old with a brand, that's insane to me. Like 95% of college athletes have no business doing anything other than just working hard, playing their sport, getting their degree, and graduating. Like, these kids, there's kids at like the Division-II and NAIA Division-III level, low-level Division-I, that are transferring like 2-3 times in their career.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, who do you think you are? Like, what contract do you think is waiting for you, that if you just got the right opportunity, that, you'd go to the league, or you'd be making millions playing whatever? Like, the overwhelming majority of college athletes aren't that good. You're not going to make a career playing your sport. So you should be using the time in athletics to be getting good at stuff that's going to translate to something other than sport.
It's a field or an activity, sports in general. And if this ends up not making any sense, I'm thinking about it in real time. But I guess I would say, like, where the stakes are defined by the stakeholders, right? It's not inherently important or objectively important or consequential in the way that a war is, or something like that, right? But it's, people who are athletes and participants, certainly they may view it as something that they're really invested in, and that's great. It's great for fans to enjoy it, but it's also true that, right, like, not to get too far afield here, but that I know people who will could call out of work the next day if the team that they root for loses a game, and they will not vote in an election because they'll say that doesn't matter when there's real consequences for real people, right? Depending on, and it's the kind of thing where the perspective is important, ultimately probably becoming even more and more important for athletes to really be able to develop a sense of perspective, a sense of strong character, strong a focus on controlling what they can control, focusing on, I guess, the process over the outcomes, right? Did I do the right things, do what I'm supposed to do? And there's certain things I can't control, as again, like things that are beyond the scope, but not that far beyond, because it's creeping further and further, with gambling and all that kind of stuff that's involved now at certainly the professional and collegiate levels, and where athletes and coaches are starting to really feel the effects of that, right? Where all the people that are outside of the sport are feeling more emboldened and invested in different ways in the outcomes, and it really affects the participants who can only focus on what they can focus on and do what they can do.
And like with professional sports, you shouldn't look up to really anybody famous. I'm not expecting any sort of virtue or morality from a professional athlete, because that's no longer athletics. It's the entertainment industry. You just happen to be playing a sport. You're an entertainer. So I'm not looking at the NFL like it has a responsibility to uphold certain moral or societal standards. Would it be nice? Sure. But I'm not going to sit here and hold them to the same standard just because it's the entertainment industry and it is what it is. Do whatever you want to do. But as far as, I don't like that is trickling down, and I mean it's past trickling, it's flooded now, amateur athletics. And even for like, and that's not to say that I'm okay with NIL from the standpoint of go back however many years and take any starting quarterback, running back, and wide receiver on a conference championship Power 5 team, and they were probably underpaid in terms of they provided more value to the university than what they got in return, which is a free degree and use of the facilities and the coaching and all that. Baker Mayfield, Jalen Hurts, Johnny Manziel, like all these guys, like they're worth way more than a degree from Texas A&M. So then they should get compensated accordingly. Like, fair enough. But the overwhelming majority of college football players and the even larger majority of college athletes getting access to facilities that some of which rival professional ones, but at the very least, a smaller school like ours, professional, highly qualified coaches who make it their full-time job and then some to make you the best athlete possible, and a free degree and free healthcare and all the other things. Like, you guys are getting a sweet deal. So again, like, I just think that I don't like how much entertainment and making and getting the bag is poisoning what I think should be regarded as an important part of a young person's character development.
Well, there's just a lot of things that can take the joy out of it if it becomes about everything else other than the sport. That the other stuff can be good, they can all be beneficial. And as you said, if in a market economy, if an athlete is delivering value for their organization, whether that's a school or a professional team, then they should earn what they're worth for that. But there's all these other opportunities provided by sports that are much deeper than just winning or losing. The opportunities that sports teams provide, not only to develop the skills around teamwork and leadership, but also to typically be able to develop relationships with new people. If it's a school team, people who are not in the same classes that you're in, right? So you're meeting new people, you're actually getting to know them, you're working with them, you're working toward a common goal. Those are all super valuable things, and they're the things that people have talked about for years as being kind of the natural consequences of participating in sports, but it's great to also have some intentionality around, okay, since we have this opportunity, let's look at developing these skills and what does that help you do in the future, whether
Yeah,
you're still in sports or otherwise. If you have leadership skills, if you know how to motivate people, if you understand hard work and work ethic, all of those kind of things, that certainly serves anyone, no matter
and
what they're doing.
those relationships that you just mentioned, like I've had conversations with coaches that they're like, why? It's not that they're going to stop, but sort of the problem that they're facing is like, why? It used to be that it was, I'm going to recruit this kid 16 and a half. They're junior in high school. So I'm going to recruit them their junior year, their senior year. So they're not even in the program yet. And I've already known them for a year and a half, 2 years. And then I get to know them their freshman year, their sophomore year, their junior year, their senior year. So by the time that an athlete has come through a program, they've had a relationship with that coach for 6 years. That's a really deep, valuable mentor-mentee kind of relationship that more and more kids are losing, because now that you can transfer whenever you want, or a kid gets here when they're 18 years old, they spend 3 months on a team and they're like, well, I'm not starting, so I'm going to head somewhere else that'll take me. The damage that they're mortgaging a long-term relationship that they could cultivate and then get benefits from later down the road for immediate satisfaction.
How about, we talked a little bit earlier about young athletes that are starting programs. Let's say if it is an athlete or a parent who's looking, for an independent or, private performance coach for their kid, or even if it's like a coach or an athletic department that's looking to bring someone in, what should they look for, like certifications wise, training qualifications, like what should people use to evaluate who's kind of the type of person they should be working with?
Like, degrees and certifications matter, so I'll address those first. Like, what you will typically see is a bachelor's in exercise science or exercise physiology or kinesiology. Some schools will get fancy and call it like human performance. Like, okay, thanks. I thought it was equine performance. Like, thanks for clearing that up. And then a master's degree, pretty much the same thing. Master's in kinesiology, master's in exercise phys. The best strength coach I know personally has none of those things. Well, I'll say certification wise, CSCS is the most common one that you'll see like schools asking for on a resume, which is Certified Strength Conditioning Specialist, and the organization is NSCA, National Strength Conditioning Association. So that's United States Weightlifting as another just really common one. And then in the college sphere, you're starting to see more SCCC, which is Strength Conditioning Coach Certified, which is through the CSCCA, which is the Collegiate Strength and Conditioning Coaches Association. So lots of S's and C's. So, and it's not that those things don't matter. Like, if somebody has them, that doesn't guarantee that they're a good coach. And if somebody doesn't have them, it doesn't guarantee that they're a bad one. So what I was saying earlier was the best strength coach I know, who I would trust implicitly with any human on earth to train them, up until like within the last like 2 or 3 years, had zero relevant experience on paper. He bachelor's in exercise phys. He didn't have a master's at all until very, very recently. I think he might have been certified just to get certified, but I respect and admire him as a coach more than anybody else that I know. And he's phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. So he's always my anecdote, like my case study of certifications and degrees mean something. I'm not going to just say, go grab somebody off the street. But it's not the be all end all. So in terms of, if you're just shopping, that makes it very easy of like, okay, well, there's 10 strength coaches, there's 10 brick and mortar places that I'm willing to drive to day to train my kid. So I'm going to look at all of their qualifications and certifications and sort by that and hope for the best. That's not a bad idea. And you'd probably be okay. But if you have the time, then you need FaceTime with them there's a base level of knowledge that you need to ensure that a coach has. Fair enough. So that's where the degree comes in, and that's where the certification comes in. One would hope. But then after that, it's much more about what the coach's priorities are. There's a lot of club sport coaches and even strength coaches that all they really care about is, I want to send these kids to as high of a level as possible so that I can say that I did. And so I can charge a higher premium and I can make more money. As opposed to, hey, this training is probably going to be boring for the first 6 months, but I promise you it's like, here's the reasons why I'm doing it. You want a coach that doesn't just have one cookie cutter way of training. I mean, I coach, I think, like 113. So we have over 400 kids at Flagler, but I coach like 114, something like that. I don't coach them all the same because I can't. And if I insisted on doing so, I wouldn't be a good coach. So you need somebody that has the wherewithal, that has the social and emotional intelligence to actually be able to assess what somebody needs more so than just, this kid has weak legs, so I'm going to squat him.
Yeah. There's one more topic I wanted to touch on here. And so we've had some episodes in the past about the recruiting process from kind of both angles, from kind of high school athletes, looking at potential colleges and different levels and where they might fit in, and a little bit from the college perspective of what they're looking for in student athletes. But what we haven't really, so I personally, I'm quite familiar with D1, and I'm actually quite familiar with D3, knowing a lot of schools, kind of understanding what that level is, but I don't really have a great understanding of what differentiates Division-II, or kind of what student athletes would find at that level. So I'd love to hear your perspective working there and working with so many different of kind of because I know that one of the things that you kind of want to emphasize, right, is not having this mentality of just being tunnel visioned on there's only Division-I, right? Or I have to be here or nothing. Like understanding that there's a lot of different opportunities out there. There's a lot of places that are good fits for different student athletes. Yeah, what have you learned about that Division-II level? Sort of what kind of differentiates those programs and makes them a good fit for student athletes?
Well, that's why I like Division-II, because it's a high enough level that it's still fun, and it's a high enough level that enough people still care that the stakeholders making the stakes are still high enough that it matters, but it's not as cutthroat as Division-I. And to be successful, to win a national championship at the Division-I level, it's obscenely difficult. Like, it is ridiculously hard. And so at a Power 5 like Florida State, ones like that can genuinely call themselves national championship contenders in multiple sports, like, you are a professional athlete in terms of every single moment of your day is scheduled. The expectations are incredibly high. And so as a result, the expectations on the coach are incredibly high too. And so that coach really only, like, the number one thing that they have to worry about is, I need to win games or I'm going to get fired. I'm not criticizing any of that. It just is what it is. If you want to perform at that high of a level, you have to win at all costs, or you have to do everything you possibly can to win. So corners get cut. And it's not like I saw anything egregious, but like, take one look at college football and you can see, I'm not even going to bother getting into all the scandals in college football or college basketball, but like, people cheat and cut corners like crazy. I'm not saying suddenly, as soon as you get to Division-II, it's sunshine and rainbows and everybody does, everybody abides by the rules. But this sounds a little weird, but because the stakes aren't quite so high, you can afford losing a season or two if it means that you're setting your culture right. And just as an example, like our athletic director, he wants to win. And if you look at the trajectory of where Flagler was when he got here, I think 12 years ago, where it is now, the tide has risen considerably, and we a lot. So he cares about winning, but what he's not going to do is sacrifice character and values and our core values in order to win, which means if he has faith in a coach that they're going to eventually get to a point where we're going to win championships, he'll give them the time that they need. We had a coach that when he first got here, he was like, look, I'm going to cut half of this team. because they don't fit. And there's some good players that I'm going to cut. They don't fit my culture. They don't fit this or that. They're not good students, whatever it was. And he did. And fast forward a number of years later, and they're one of the most successful teams in recent history. And if they keep winning the way that they're winning, it'll just be in all of Flagler's history. So that really high level Power Five, like, it's understandable that a coach or a coaching staff or administration would have those expectations of athletes of, we own you for the next 4 years. And that's fine because they're being provided like take UF, for example. Those are world-class facilities, at least the ones I've seen. Right. And the coaching staff and everything that they're provided, like, it's kind of reasonable for them to say, you stand when we say stand and sit when we say sit for 4 years in a row. But, like, I won't name any other Division I institutions, but, like, there's low major D1s, there's mid-major D1s that, like, sorry, but you're not worth doing that for. Mm-hmm. So this go D1 mentality, like, I want to go D1, is not really helping kids out, because a lot of Division I schools hold those expectations and have no business asking for those expectations to be met. So as a result, you get a crappy experience, you get a coach that's probably going to get fired, and you're just not going to have any of the expectations that you had of the school as, I thought this was D1. I thought, you know, all the glitz and the glamour. Like, it's not going to be that at all. So we get plenty of, like, when I was at UNF, which is a low major D1, we got tons of mid and Power 5 transfers that were like, I hated it there for all the reasons I just mentioned. Mm-hmm. And then at the Division II level, we get a bunch of low and mid major transfers from Division I saying, I hate it there for all the reasons I just mentioned. So it's not that Division I is bad. It's that it's for, if you want to go D1, you need to know what you're getting into before you do. And if you aren't ready for that, I'm not going to judge you for it. I'm not in Division I for that reason. I don't like it up there. I'd much rather be down here where we're allowed to care about more than wins and losses.
Yeah, and it's a fit, not just at which level, but within a level, right? Because, you know, those athletic scholarships are only promised 1 year at a time, right? And so if you're at the lower end of a roster, there's a lot of turnover when there's that much emphasis on winning and losing. So either a coach gets replaced and a new coach comes in, or even that coach decides, oh, well, I want to recruit these new players and I only have so many spots. They could say, well, you don't have a scholarship anymore, which can prove to be trouble, right? If you're counting on that and you don't want to move schools. But if you're highly, you know, if you're at the top of that roster, it's a great opportunity. And the same thing can apply anywhere, but it's all about, I think, just kind of approaching the process with an open mind, with really being willing to go out and get honest advice and feedback and determine what's going to be the best experience, and then also making the decision that you want to make. If you decide I'm going to this school because this is just my dream and this is where I want to be no matter what, then go for it. If you decide something else, go for it. But these are hard decisions to make as teenagers, so it's good discussions to have with coaches that hopefully can provide some advice, with parents who can get some information and understand the variety of options that are available and the realities that are a challenge. And for all the things, as much as things change, some of the challenges stay the same, particularly in some of these sports. On a football roster where they may have at a D1 program over 100 athletes on that roster, there's a lot of variance in the experience that you're having depending on how you fit in. So it's just good things to look into.
Those Division I schools that I mentioned, of which there like way more Division I schools than not, can't honestly say they're competing for a national championship. But if they even want to, like, if you don't want to finish in the bottom of the conference of whatever Division I conference you're in, you have to hold yourself to a standard like a UF or an Ohio State or whatever. So it's, like I said, it's not that there's anything that those schools do that because you have to, it's that you as the athlete have to put in the Division I effort, and you're just not going to get a Division I experience, whether it's you're not going to get to play or you're going to get to play, but it's going to be for a team that just right off the bat, you know you're not going to have any success. And to some people, like I was a scrub in high school and I was on a state championship caliber, not winning, football team. And I barely played it down, but I enjoyed going to practice. I liked working hard. I liked knowing I was part of something big. Cool. So if you're a kid that's like, hey, I'm happy to go D1. I know I'm not going to play. I just like being a part of the program. That's cool too. But there's some kids that like the only Division I offer they're going to get is from horrible team state in this horrible conference. And all it's going to be is 4 years of Division I expectations and losing all the time. So to like, at least me personally, I'd much rather go to a Division II and compete at a high level. And maybe I'm not even playing at that Division II, but like I want to be working towards something.
Yeah, the good thing is, listeners, Chad, if you're interested in this aspect of it, if you're working with high school student athletes who are considering or wanting to go play at the college level, listen to our previous episodes on this as well, look into it, see what resources you can find, because the good thing in this digital age is if you can perform, people can find you and you can get the word out, right? Regardless of where you are. And ultimately, if you're happy and you're in a good environment and you're getting a good education and all of those things, you're going to have good opportunities that come from that. And that can happen in a lot of places. There's a lot of good opportunities out there, a lot of great schools, a lot of great programs. And it's hard to learn about all of it, but the more you know, the more you can hopefully make decisions that are best for you. So everybody, thanks for listening. Thanks, Connor, for being here. Listeners, you can learn more about Connor's work at getstrongperformance.com. That's with 2 T's. Anything listeners should check out? What can they learn about on the website? Anything like that?
It will basically just a rehash of, or like if you go to the website, it'll just give you a little bit more information about me, kind of just the mission statement of the company and like why I do what I do, why we do what we do. My contact info is at the bottom of the page. It's just Coach G at getstrongperformance.com. I always, because I've been around our area talking to local clubs or high schools about sports performance, stuff like that. So information is free. Like if anybody wants to reach out because you're local and you want to train with me, cool, awesome. But wherever you are, if you're somebody that just wants, whether it's training advice or college advice or anything else, if you go to Get Strong Performance, whenever you read kind of why we do what we do, the whole reason I do is because I want to help young people do the thing better, whatever that thing is. Well, I'd be pretty hypocritical if somebody reached out and I said, sorry, that's going to cost you X, Y, and Z. So if anybody wants to shoot me an email, or I don't know if my phone number is on there or not, but the door is wide open and I will happily respond to anything anybody wants to chat about.
Excellent. We will put the link to the website below. We'll also put the link to the Instagram page so that you can follow along there if you want to learn more. Please also do subscribe to Sideline Sessions if you're not already, on whichever platform you prefer. We'll continue to bring you insights from coaches and other performance experts at all levels and all sports throughout the rest of this season and into our next season. And visit bpodcast.network online if you want to learn about the rest of our shows. Connor, thanks so much for being here.
Appreciate you having me. Thank you.